Hey, today I am filming in my car because I was just so excited and like so moved by all the things you said in your video. Like, I felt like, I felt like you were just like a writing coach and just gave all this tremendous advice. And I was like, I was not expecting this when I did my video. I didn't expect you to like address things like in a kind way. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way. I was just really caught off guard by that. So I took notes again today when I was listening to your video, and I don't know, there were so many good things that I really loved what you said. Like, I think the biggest thing was when you're writing the first draft, that is for you, or like for me, for us, the writer. And when you're editing, then that is for the reader. And I don't know, like that was a big light bulb transformation moment, and I feel like it just takes a lot of pressure off. And I think that too explains why I'm really introverted with my writing, because it's just me writing and just me and my thoughts, and you know, I don't have to worry about anybody else coming in and be like, hey, maybe you should do this instead, unless I vocalize and purposely like go to somebody to ask them. Like you have done that before, and that's different because I'm in the mindset and I'm ready for that. But obviously, like, if I don't and people like are giving feedback, then no, I'm not okay. I actually heard that like Stephen King doesn't like tell anybody about his first drafts or something like that, or like he locks himself up in a cabin, writes a story, and like won't tell anybody what it's about or anything like that. Well, probably like his publisher. I don't know how that would work. I honestly have like absolutely no idea. Anyway, I gotta roll down my windows. It's getting a little bit hot in my car. So, that was turning off the heat. That was not rolling down the windows. So you had a pretty loaded question. What genre do you write in? And I feel like typically for the normal writer, that'd be like such an easy question. But I feel like, I don't feel like it's an easy question. It's like asking, what is your favorite book? Like asking a reader that question. Like, how do they answer with just one book? I am the same case in my writing. I feel like I write in a variety of genres. I really love portal fantasy. I love reading portal fantasy. I love writing portal fantasy. And it's really funny, when you were talking about in your video, you were mentioning that you like writing fantasy because you can deal with heavier topics. And I had to laugh because I love writing portal fantasy in that I feel like you get the best of both worlds. I really feel as a writer, it's extremely important for people to know, like when I'm writing in the real world, because I feel like I'm so rambly. Anyway, but I have been writing contemporary, and I've also been writing portal fantasy. I'm currently working on like a fantasy, the Spite story, which I have to laugh. It starts off in the fantasy world, so that's a thumbs up for me. It's not starting out in the real world, but the fantasy world. And that's actually been really, really new for me. That's not something that I'm like used to or even like familiar with doing. And I've Gathering Faith, like my manga, that's hopefully will be releasing in spring of next year. I was going to say more than that, but I decided to not say anything. So yes, but next year, Lord willing, next year for sure. But that had paranormal aspects, and I was really, really caught off guard by that, because that was one genre I did not want to write in. I was not a fan of paranormal paranormal genres in general, even though I've read quite a few, but I don't know, I'm just not keen on it, because I just don't like reading about angels and demons, and that has been a really interesting journey, just like that's be another story for another day, but of seeing how far I've come, where I don't mind reading it as much. And so maybe that comes from writing in this genre too, because it's just been, it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's a mashup of genres. It's like contemporary, paranormal, and fantasy. Take it how you want, I suppose. I really don't know. It's just a genre mashup. And I guess, I really love genre mashups. I love reading that. But anyway, where was I in the beginning of this ramble? Where was I going? Oh, that's where I was at. So, I love Japan. I love Tokyo, especially. Like, Tokyo is like, my heart is in Tokyo. Like, it's just, I love Tokyo. I'm very, very fascinated with everything with it. It's one place that I would love to go if I could go to Japan. And not only that, but I really like portal fantasy, and I've really noticed that Usually when I'm writing a real world setting, I prefer to write it in Tokyo or somewhere near Tokyo, but somewhere in that general vicinity. And I am just such a firm believer. The reason I love Portal Fantasy is I'm a firm believer that there is hope for the real world. Like, we could read all the fantasy stories all day, like for any person, like not just you, not just me, but I'm talking about any reader, that we could read all of the hopeful fantasy stories in the world. We could see these characters embark on these incredible adventures and see them overcome, see them heal, forgive, see them just start over and have things that we wish for our own life. Like whether that's reconciliation with a family member or a friend, or being forgiven for an action we thought that was like unforgivable. And I just, those things don't just have to be in fantasy worlds. Like that can happen in real life. And I love writing contemporary and portal fantasy for that reason. I want people to know, like, hey, those outcomes for those characters are not just for them. Like they can be for you and me. Like they are real things that can really happen. And the more that I have written like contemporary stories or wanted to write them or brainstorm them, like the more I see it that like, yes, like people need to know there's hope for the real world. And that's why that was one of, I think, my taglines when I first started doing book blogging. I think it was like Hope Through the Pages was the name of it. That was like my whole brand at that point was just centered around that, because I just believe that so much as a person that there really is hope for the real world. Do I like think, you know, that people can't gather that information or like, not gather that information, but like can't realize that? No, I think you're definitely right that, and I'm definitely not arguing, not trying to make that sound argumentative, but no buts. I feel like I dug myself into a hole. What I'm trying to just say, though, is I feel, though, that, yes, people can make that connection with fantasy and bring that over into the real world, because I definitely have. And I can say a dystopian story helped me actually forgive my stepdad for things that many people probably would not forgive for what he's done to our family. But I was like, I don't want to be like this character. He was my favorite character, and he was so grumpy and so moody, but his bitterness spoke to me on a very personal level that I do not think I could have gotten from a contemporary story at all. I feel like just God used that character to speak to me, and it helped me forgive my dad for the things he did. So I think maybe there's a time and place. I feel like it, for me, in this time and place, that it's definitely like, I want to write more contemporary stories. I have one that I'm brainstorming. That's a volleyball one, because it tends to be, if I have a contemporary story that I'm brainstorming, volleyball is one of the key things that will be in that story in some form or fashion. And I definitely blame that for Haikyuu, because Hinata is incredible and he's so inspiring. And we could just have a whole little happy tangent about how amazing Hinata is. Kageyama is amazing too, but Hinata is just fabulous. He is just incredible. There's like no words to describe Hinata except for that he's amazing. Anyway, so that's definitely a common thing in my books, is I try and purposely at this point have some kind of volleyball reference, or like, I think I have two male characters where they're both volleyball players, and yep, no regrets whatsoever on that. So with the Portal Fantasy, I have not written as much, but this, was it Isekai? That with this story, the Spite story, as we are currently calling it, because it doesn't have a title, I don't know exactly. You came up with the title that my brain was like, this is perfect, and it spurred this whole incredible world, and I absolutely love it. The male guy right now actually reminds me of Zoro from One Piece. Not that he is Zoro by any means, I don't feel he is at all, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just his demeanor or the way he looks just reminds me of a pirate, and like my brain's like, man, he reminds me of Zoro, and that's really cool, but he doesn't have green hair. So anyway, I even have my Luffy sweatshirt on right now. But writing fantasy, I think, is an interesting thing for me, because I really struggled with it growing up. I felt like I was raised, or my brain was like, reading fantasy is evil. You're gonna go to hell for this. And I actually remember the day I sat in my car and I called my youth pastor and was like, I had gotten this book. It was called Heartless. It's a really good like fantasy series. And I was like, John, I was like, am I gonna go to hell for this because it has dragons in it? And it makes me laugh now, but back then, like, I was so incredibly scared that that would happen. And so I think it's been a very healing thing to be writing in fantasy right now, or portal fantasy, because the only pure fantasy story I have is Kinryu. And so he's the only one. And even then, I'm trying to do a little bit of Dragon Ball kind of thing where I'm like, could I somehow make this a portal fantasy? Because it's like, it'd be really cool to have real world elements into his story and whatnot. And so I think I have a little bit of a crossover between that story and another story that's not even portal fantasy, but anyway, at least not that the characters in the story actually know. Reading, I'm all over the place. I'm definitely all over the place. I actually don't read much contemporary. And it's funny, I meant to bring my copy of Dear Author so I could share Dear Author like you did Shadow's Hand, but I forgot to bring my copy of Dear Author. But I never imagined I would write nonfiction. I don't like reading nonfiction. I really actually struggle with it because I need a picture in my head, and nonfiction usually doesn't give me that kind of picture that I need to comprehend and understand it. But Dear Author came definitely from a really personal place where I thought that I would not be able to support authors and such. So that's one genre that I don't read and don't typically write in, but I would be willing to write more. But I try and make it in a way that's fun for me, in a way that I can easily understand. I do feel, going back though to what genres I write in with contemporary and portal fantasy, I really do feel like anime is sort of inspiring these things of what I want to write in, because I directly notice influences, like we're watching One Piece, and I definitely see correlations between One Piece and my story of like different elements just from One Piece, not the actual storyline or anything like that. The car line is unfortunately moving, so that means I have to wrap up, and I don't have a question for you this week, so that means you are free to talk about whatever you want to and tell me all of the things, because I love doing this with you. It is so much fun, and I hope anybody who's not Noelle that's listening is enjoying it too, because it's just really funny to me to get to know Noelle better. I mean, we've been, friends for a year, and it is just so amusing to see different things come out, like your loathing for the chosen trope, which I think is just absolutely hilarious, which I guess is why my brain's like, let's do a spite story, not on purpose. I didn't call it that. I didn't think it. Nope, I take that back. I did think it was a little bit, but I didn't actually expect it to go anywhere. And here I am, writing this fantasy world with, I feel like, no kind of experience whatsoever, because the portal fantasy stories I have written definitely center on the real world side. So we are going to see what happens with that. So you have, like I said, free reign to talk about whatever you want to next week. I'm really excited to see what you will share. Wait, next week? That'll be in like 2 days. Apparently, I have my days all mixed up. Anyway, I can't wait to hear what you have to say and what we will talk about next. And I'm sorry that this video was not longer than I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be longer. Hopefully I said that right. Yeah, I wanted this video to be longer, but I was able to enthusiastically say that I totally believe there's hope for the real world, and that's why I like contemporary. And hopefully one day we'll go be able to visit Tokyo to see the real life inspiration for my stories. Bye!